to a greater purpose than he could have possibly imagined. It's time to wake up and discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me both on the Riverside studio and on the Facebook Live is Patrick Creehan. Hey, Patty, how you doing today, man?
Hey, Paulie. Doing good, thanks.
It has been a while since we've had you on the podcast.
Well, you know, that is not your fault. I've been reluctant to come back just with the busyness of life and all that, but it's good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's been reluctant. I think
not reluctant.
It's not like you've had a lot of stuff going on, you know, a job change, family stuff. You've been busy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been. Yeah. Thanks for that. But you know, it's good to be back and talking about this. I don't think you can call it a classic yet, but it's up on the blockbuster list. I think still one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about Avatar today, just in case you didn't read the title of the podcast of it as you're getting started. James Cameron directed, Sigourney Weaver, Giovanni Ribisi, Sam Worthington are the main. Zoe Saldana. This is like, I think the third movie with her in it that we've done. So we like her a lot. But really, I think the star of this movie was James Cameron, who directed it, created it, came out of nowhere, or came out of his brain, his imagination, and was really groundbreaking with the technology. And it's sort of like if you wait a while to watch a movie, like when I watched Heat, it was last year. And so a lot of the scenes is like, oh my gosh, this was one of the awesomest, gunfight scenes. Well, seeing it, 20 years later is like, yeah, I've seen this before. Mm-hmm. So, but Avatar was a movie that you mentioned that like is awesome on a big screen. And you said is one of your favorite movies, which is why we're doing this.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I saw it in the theater, but it was definitely one you had to go to see in the theater if you could. Like if you were around back then and were of movie going age, like this was one that I hope you got to see in the theater on the big screen and even in 3D. Now 3D had its time, and there's still some movies that come out in 3D and you can still do that whole thing, but it's kind of lost in popularity recently, but it was one of the first movies I think that was done in 3D where it didn't feel all gimmicky. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to reach out into the screen and poke you with something. It wasn't done like that. You just felt like you were there, and it was really, really well done that way. And a few movies have been done really well that way since then, but that was the first one I remember being like, wow, they did 3D correctly.
Yeah. And I think this originally came up, the conversation, because you went to Disney World. That's the one in Florida, right? Disneyland's out on the other coast. So you went to Disney World and they had just opened the Pandora exhibit experience, their land.
Yeah. Hollywood Studios or whatever they call that now. They just opened the new area within that park. Pandora, they try to make it feel like you're in Pandora when you're there, and there's a new ride there. I forget what they call it. It's like the ride of initiation or something. I forget what they call it, but it was a really awesome ride where you feel like you're on one of the Ekrons, and it was so cool. It was so awesome. And even I was telling you, even the line, like I think we had to wait in line for like an hour and a half or
oh my word,
2 hours maybe. I don't remember.
No fast pass for you.
No, they charge for those now. Like it's so annoying. Anyway,
We'll talk about the evils of capitalism later.
Right. That's coming up. Stay tuned. Standing in line for that ride was an experience by itself that was so fun and enjoyable because Disney does it well anyway, but you feel like you're in the forest kind of walking through, and then you go inside and you're walking through like one of the labs, and then you're in like the mobile unit, that they carry around, and then you're in the forest at night, and then you're, going through another one of the labs or something. I don't remember. And it's so neat. And they've got like it looks like you're on the movie set. I mean, you're just like walking through all the equipment, and they got the little units that you sleep in and that kind of thing. It was so cool just to look at everything and hear the noises that they have and all that. And then you get on the ride, and it's like unbelievable.
As fun. Disney does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here in Charlotte, we have Carowinds as our amusement park. So if you're waiting in a line in Carowinds, what you get to look at is the other people and bars that keep you in your line.
Yeah, with gum stuck to them and all that.
Right. It's and I used to work there, so it's, hey, please don't sit on the rails, get off the, it's all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there, like we went to Disney several years ago for my brother's 40th birthday. That's what he wanted to do before the Pandora. It was even before, Star Wars had taken over the Hollywood, back when it was Hollywood Studios, I think, whatever, like you said, whatever it is now. Like when you went to, what was it? The Yeti one in Animal Planet, and you're in there and you feel like you're in a shack in the Himalayas,
right.
And it's so immersive. And I think that's what this movie is you, as the main character, Jake, goes in and he's experiencing all that. And that's what made the 3D so cool, because it wasn't, as you mentioned, the stuff sticking out at you. It was like there was a depth to the screen. Like it felt like the screen wasn't a screen. It was an open window that entered into another world. So we're doing the Facebook Live, and I have a comment here from Dave Reed. He and I went through the C.S. Lewis Institute Fellows program together a couple years ago. He says, we should have painted our faces blue for this.
That is a missed opportunity, Dave. You are absolutely correct.
Which is interesting. You mentioned seeing this in the theater a lot. I went to see Braveheart, is probably my most theater watched movie, both involving blue faces. So there must be something to that. You mentioned how much you love this movie, how you saw it a billion times. And the funny thing was, when you watched it, you texted and said, I'm not sure we have much to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to this podcast.
Yeah. So wasn't that interesting? So I mean, I was excited about doing this movie, and then sitting down and watching it again in the context of like, okay, I'm going to, watch it with the lens of, what we kind of talk about in this podcast. And I got through it, and you're right. I texted you, and I was like, I don't know that there's anything there. And what was so cool, and what I told you, I was like, I think we need to do the podcast this way, because what you texted me back was, well, why do you like the movie? And I think that's such a great question to ask, and what we kind of are driving to with this podcast, and kind of the point of why we do it at all, is that we're, just like in the intro, I think it was Britt that said the movies and stories we love are gateways to see God in new ways, right? And and that these stories are keys to unlocking God's truth. And like the reason that we love them is that they reflect truth. They reflect the gospel in some way, sometimes, right? Some stories do. And the ones that we love, we can examine why is it that we love them. And oftentimes the reason that we love them is that it echoes this larger story. And so you asked, well, why do you like it? I was like, oh, yeah, that is the critical, like, central question, right? Is, well, why do you like it? What is it about the movie that you like it? And if you start there and kind of drill in deeper, rather than going, oh, how does this movie reflect the gospel? You go, well, no, why do I like it? And then the answer to that often connects the two, right? Right. We'll speak to what it is about the gospel message or the kingdom that God is creating that resonates with us as people. And so, yeah, that was a really good way to start. And I was like, let's just do it that way. Let's do. I don't really believe that there's anything in this movie to pull out, and you do. And so let's just walk through it in real time with people and talk about what's there. And you can help me in my stubbornness or whatever to be able to connect those dots. And maybe that'll be a helpful exercise that, other people can take to other movies that they watch.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you said that about connecting the two. Mm-hmm. I currently have a microwave in my kitchen that is on an interior wall. Mm-hmm. It does not vent anywhere. Like it has the recirculation, but all it does is get grease and stuff over the cabinet that's above it. And I don't like that. I do have something sticking out of the roof, a vent sticking out of the roof. However, they are not connected. So right now my microwave just venting straight into the drywall behind the stove. I'm sure it's not a fire hazard. I'm sure it'll be fine. I have friends that come over on Tuesday nights and I'm going to maybe one day get to do manual labor. But when you said it's about connecting the two, because I've had other people talk, they'll say, well, who's the Jesus figure in this story? Thinking that every story is going to be, have a Jesus figure in it. And maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know, but it's typically not as cut and dried. But we are sort of stepping back. We are going to say, well, because it's easy to sort of to go deep into this, 30-foot focused conversation about, if it's Top Gun, about the orphan spirit or about finding, joy or initiation or whatever. But this idea that we just to, like you said, take that step back and it's like, wait a minute. What do I love about this movie? Why do I rewatch it? Why was I excited to introduce my boys to it? And I love the place in Disney World. Why do I resonate? Why does that resonate? I think that makes it a little more realistic, because if you're looking at a movie and saying, no, it has to fit the gospel or it has to fit this story, then you're going to be forcing it. A lot of times you're like, well, yeah, sort of. I mean, one of the main characters' name is Grace, and you talked about the Hallelujah Mountains, and you're like, oh, there's Bible terms, so let's dive into that. Or it's Pandora's box, and what happens when you open the box, and what's in the box, which is an entirely different movie. Not sure we'll ever do 7 on this podcast. That'd be one of those dark days. That's probably a solo effort.
There was a Justin Timberlake Saturday Night Live skit that answers the question, what's in the box?
Yes, that'll air on our Christmas episode.
Got it.
So going back to the question, and that's one of the reasons we try to lead, and I've sort of gotten away from that question recently, but not just why did you pick this movie, but why do you love this movie? Like, what are the scenes really that stick out most to you, Patrick?
I think there's a lot of like holistic type elements that I really liked about the movie. Like you spoke about James Cameron directing and kind of pioneering this front, right? Where, I mean, the CGI is unbelievable. The 3D was done really well. The music is amazing. All that's really cool. It's otherworldly, but you watch movies that take place in other worlds, but it's like Earth. You can tell, it's just like, oh, they're in Utah, but this one, everything in it had to be invented, I mean, they had the concept of trees and plants and animals and things like that, but every plant was this thing you'd never seen before and behaved oddly, like you coil back up real small or whatever. and all the animals were things you'd never seen or imagined before. And so there was just this real sense of like, oh wow, there's just like lots to look at and take in and experience. And you felt like you were experiencing it when you watched it, especially if you saw it in the theater in 3D. So I loved all that. I think like story wise, the scenes, I think the first scene that really hit me was when, Jake is the main character. He is sent to Pandora in place of his twin brother because he has the same DNA, and therefore he's able to drive the Avatar, this big blue character that he's able to create a neural link with and control through his brain waves somehow. And so very expensive science project. He had to go take over the place of his brother. So he's there. Jake was a vet, had his legs. He's a paraplegic or and
I don't think we ever find out what happened. Like what?
Just that it was military related. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know. They don't really go into it. But he's in a wheelchair, can't move his legs. So he gets there and he makes his way into the chamber where you put yourself in touch with the Avatar. And Grace is very quickly trying to give him a lesson because there's a huge manual and many years of training you're supposed to have gone through, and he didn't do any of it. And so he's just kind of winging it. And he gets in there and connects with his Avatar for the first time and wakes up, and the scientists are trying to connect him, test him, like, oh, move your fingers, move your toes. Oh, that's really good. Okay, sit up slowly, and he's doing all that.
And he's like, screw that.
He's like, forget all this. I am so excited to just be able to stand up. And he like rips all the cords off and just starts running. And it was like that sense of freedom and, empowerment, I guess you could say, that he experienced in that moment. He was set free in a way in this new body. And I think, part of what we'll talk about is this kind of contrast between the false self and the true self. And with this story, with this movie tests is which one is which. and we often, I think, get confused about who am I really? Like, what is that true self and what is the false self? Because sometimes we can act and not know which one we're operating out of, and it takes some discernment to figure it out. And there's this point in the movie where it kind of flips for Jake, and he realizes what is real. He questions it for a minute, but then he goes into what is real. But this initial moment where he like rips off all the cords and just starts running, and they're chasing after him, like, no, you're going too fast. Don't hurt yourself. And he's like, I just want to run. I just, and for whatever reason, that hit me. So what does that do for you? Like,
I think that the image of Jake as the character is interesting if you really start stepping back and looking at him. I'm doing some classes on masterclass on filmmaking, screenwriting, stuff like that. And Aaron Sorkin, who wrote stuff like The West Wing or Few Good Men or Moneyball or The Social Network, 2-bit things nobody's ever heard of. He talks about this idea of intention and obstacles. Like, you've got to have an intention, you've got to have obstacles to make a story interesting. And when you look at Jake, he's a guy who's coming to Pandora. He's in grief because we see him at his brother's funeral. We find out he's in a wheelchair, but he used to be a Marine, and a pretty good one. The colonel talks about it a little bit later. He's like, oh, I can't remember the place it was, but he's like, oh, you've been here? That was a shit show. He's like, how did the fact that you survived it says something about you. It spoke to his warrior heart, his Marine identity. And for him, that's who he was. And he shows up, like you said, because he shares the same DNA. And so I want to actually pull a clip, because when he gets there, he's there basically because his really smart brother died, but they have the same DNA. So he can drive the Avatar. That's the name of the movie. It's, just like the little pictures that you see on all the social media stuff. You have your avatars. But I'm not going to go but yet. Because a lot of times I show up somewhere and I feel like Jake. I feel like I was supposed to do this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing. But I'm just here. I haven't been trained. And the people who are in charge and looking at him are just like, oh my gosh, I wish you didn't even show up. So what we're going to listen to is Jake showing up at Pandora, speaking to Grace, who's the main scientist who knows everything about the Na'vi people, who are the big blue people, right? Mm-hmm. And she gets frustrated because he doesn't look like what she wants, even though we will come to find out through the movie that he will actually accomplish all that she's been trying to accomplish basically her whole time in Pandora.
Grace Augustine is a legend. She's the head of the Avatar program. She wrote the book. I mean, literally wrote the book on Pandoran botany.
Well, that's because she likes plants better than people.
Grace? This is Jake Sully.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know who you are, and I don't need you. I need your brother. You know, the PhD who trained for 3 years for this mission.
He's dead. I know it's a big inconvenience for everyone.
How much lab training have you had?
I dissected a frog once.
You see? I mean, they're just pissing on us without even the courtesy of calling it rain. I'm going to Selfridge.
No, Grace.
No, man, this is such bullshit. I'm gonna kick his corporate butt. He has no business sticking his nose in my department. I need a researcher, not some jarhead dropout.
Well, actually, I thought we got lucky with him.
Lucky?
Yeah.
How is this in any way lucky?
Well, lucky your guy had a twin brother, and lucky that brother wasn't some oral hygienist or something. A Marine we can use. I'm assigning him to your team as security escort.
The last thing I need is another trigger-happy moron out there.
Look, you're supposed to be winning the hearts and the minds of the natives. Isn't that the whole point of your little puppet show? If you look like them and you talk like them, then they'll start trusting us. We build them a school, we teach them English, but after what, how many years? Relations with the indigenous are only getting worse.
Yeah, that tends to happen when you use machine guns on them.
Right. Come here. I can't. This is why we're here. Unobtainium. Because this little gray rock sells for 20 million a kilo. That's the only reason. It's what pays for the whole party. It's what pays for your science. Comprendo? Now those savages are threatening our whole operation. We're on the brink of war, and you're supposed to be finding a diplomatic solution. So use what you've got and get me some results.
So, how much link time have you logged?
About 520 hours.
That's good. You're in there. You're here. How much have you logged?
Zip. But I read a manual.
Tell me you're joking.
This is cool.
Let's go.
Don't. Got this.
So you just figured you'd come out here to the most hostile environment known to man with no training of any kind and see how it went? What was going through your head?
Maybe I was sick of doctors telling me what I couldn't do.
So that was like a splicing of 3 scenes there, because I feel like Jake a lot. Like, for instance, why am I, a 47-year-old man, watching a masterclass by Aaron Sorkin or Judd Apatow or Martin Scorsese on filmmaking or screenwriting or comedy? Why would I be doing something about cinematography? Why would I be doing this podcast? You know, people say, well, what do you do with yourself? Well, basically, I write movies, I take notes, and it's my job that doesn't pay me very much. If you would like to support us, go to patreon.com/Minute the Movies. You know, I've spent 20 years as a nurse, but that's not really where I want to continue my progress in my career. But you see that in Jake. It's not that he doesn't want to. He wants to be a Marine. You see that in his interactions with the colonel. He's like, oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I'll report on intel. I'll report on what's going on. I'll be your eyes and ears so that the Marines can have a successful thing, because that's where I belong. I don't fit in with these science dorks. But what we see in Jake is it takes tragedy. It takes catastrophe. It takes not just losing his legs, but losing his brother to get him where he was most needed.
Like I think about Jake being a Marine and having his legs taken away from him. And there's not a whole lot he can do in the Marines like he was doing without his legs. Like I'm sure there are jobs that can be had, but not the same way he was. It was, the colonel was like, oh man, that was some, I forget what adjective he used, like rough brush or whatever he said. He was talking about Venezuela, and Jake was like, yeah, he's like, oh man, you're a real Marine kind of thing. And, kind of speaking into him that way, which I'm sure puffed him up some and that, all that stuff. And he wanted that back. And so the colonel makes a promise to him like, hey, listen, you do this for me and I'll get you your legs back, your real legs, but that's kind of what Grace was offering too, was legs, right? I mean, and the colonel was saying, oh, that's not real. That's not the real thing. Right. But by the end, actually that is real, like that is Jake. And he ended up getting his legs, but not the way that the colonel was promising, which is, through these other means that he ended up, kind of rebelling against. It was kind of cool that the identity that he thought he wanted, he pursued, and he even used that on this new team, right? He wasn't going to fulfill the same job that his brother had because his brother was a scientist. He was going to go take samples along with Norm and Grace and all them. But now Jake's on there and he's the gun, the hired, gun kind of guy, another security guy on the team, and which Grace wasn't really happy about, but that was going to be his role. And of course they get there on their first little mission and he's playing with all the plants, finds the rhinoceros thing, whatever it was. It chases them away. He ends up jumping off the cliff and has to survive the night and, makes a spear out of a stick and lights it on fire and is, fighting those little animals. And that's when he first meets Neytiri and she's like dismayed at how he behaved and said, oh, this is not good. This is sad. Like what just happened.
Right.
And that's kind of like that moment where things start to change for Jake. And his story starts to change because he loses the gun, right? The gun's gone at that point. And he has to learn how to survive a new way. And when he does, once she rescues him and starts like leading him away from that place, the forest changes and he starts seeing it not as this other, like this scary place that he has to hide and cower away from, but as this living thing that he can interact with that thinks he's special, in some way, with the little seeds landing on him and everything.
Right.
But he can only see that when he has Neytiri there. And Neytiri she's like the love interest, but also sort of his mentor through this initiation process that he ends up going through. But he doesn't get to see that until he's with her. She's the one who opens his eyes to that other world. I think that's another part of this movie, to come back to your original question, that I really connect with and love, is this idea of Jake being initiated and walk through this process of learning how to live a new kind of life with a guide, a mentor of some sort.
You actually used a phrase, and I thought you were going to go really deep with it, but you just kept going because Grace did invite him. Again, we are going super spiritual on it. Her name is Grace. Yeah. And what Grace invites him into is a bigger, more wonderful, more beautiful life than he could ever have imagined. I think there's a verse in Ephesians like that or something, isn't there? Where it says, God can do more than we ask or imagine. Because what we think is tragedy, what we think is broken legs or paraplegia where we can't even use our legs, what we think is a loss of identity of the Marines, what we think is, what am I doing here? Because these people think I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. Becomes, oh my gosh, I can run again. And while Grace and Norm are inspecting the roots and the dirt, he's over there playing with the plants and discovering things with childlike wonder. He's seeing things that they can't see because they're so focused. And for him, it's all new. For him, it's all spectacular. Very much like when we saw it in the theater for the first time. We're just like blown away by the imagination and what's possible. So he sees things differently. But then the other thing is Pandora is not something to be afraid of. They're like, everything out here is meant to kill you is the safety briefing. It's like,
right.
But what Neytiri taught Jake was Pandora wasn't something to be scared of. And this place of wonder and beauty and delight and amazement was actually something to be sort of engaged in and chased after and not to be scared of, but to push into that. And that's how we look at the spiritual world. I grew up really scared of God. Like, I don't do things I'm supposed to do. I don't keep the 10 commandments every day. I don't, I do bad things. I, hit my brother. You fill up the list, of whatever young boys do. And it's like, oh, I tell lies and I do this. And I'm just like, ugh, God's not something to be like amazed with or wonderful. It's something that he's just out there waiting to punish me, waiting to lay the smack down.
Yeah.
But when you have somebody to sort of, as she did, is to initiate him, to walk him through the process of, no, here's how you live here. And the more he knows, the more beautiful and the more awesome it becomes.
Yeah, it's wild because, Grace's goal with her whole team, and we see it, carry on with Norm, and it was supposed to be with Jake's brother for a while, was that they wanted to get in with the Na'vi people and learn their ways, help the Na'vi with things that they thought the Na'vi wanted in exchange for, learning and experiences that the Na'vi could teach Grace and her team. And so she'd been trying for years. She built a school, tried to teach him English, and it only got so far. Like she was never able to make it all the way in. And so you when we're introduced to the forest and Grace's team, they get off the ship and they walk like 10 steps and they stop and they're like down in the dirt, taking samples from a root and, all this stuff. And Jake's walking around and all this. And you see Jake eventually makes it all the way in. Like he gets added to the people. He becomes one of the people. Right. But it's funny because when you watch all the people in the Avatar program, even just outside the camp and as they travel and stuff, they're doing things like wearing human clothes and wearing shoes and things like this. And when Neytiri finds Jake and he's all beat up and, all torn up and everything, she's like, "You're such a child," and it's just like, it reminded me of when Paul is talking to the Corinthians and he's like, I had to give you milk because you're such babies spiritually, like you're not ready for solid food yet. You have to start at the beginning and then grow and add as you mature. And that's kind of the process that she's taking him through, and how initiation, how, maturity in the spiritual realms works, even is you can't just jump right to riding the Ikron. You can't be the, Makto or whatever, the rider of the giant orange
What was it? The Shadow from Above or something?
Yeah.
That was the name of it.
Yeah. You can't jump right to that. There's a process, and you can't skip the process. So she had to teach him how to walk. She had to teach him how to fall. She had to teach him how to stand up and how to talk to an animal and eventually how to kill an animal and how to, do all these things. And then maybe try to ride the horse thingy. And that didn't work. And so she's taking him through all these steps as he grows. And only when he kind of gets to that final step of initiation, kind of that turning point, initiation moment where he gets his Zekron, and bonds with it, makes the bond or whatever they call it. Yeah. And jumps off the cliff and flies and seals the bond, like that. And he was like, okay, now you're part of the people. And so, I just appreciated that whole process and him not just like making it in because, the seed landed on him. Like, that's cool. And that was a sign that he's got a calling on his life. Right. And we have these moments where there's like, you get little glimpses or little shadows of a calling, of a future, kind of state that God is calling you into or whatever. But there's still a process. There's still an initiation. And David went through this too, where Samuel came and he anointed him as king, but he didn't become king that day. He was anointed as king. There was a whole process, like all the Goliath stuff, all that stuff happened after the anointing. So there's a process that we have to walk through, and that Jake had to walk through before he was, made part of the people and had the voice and could call people brother and all that thing. Could stand up and say, I have a right to speak here, and that was, now he's a man, now he's part of the people. And we have to do that too, as followers of Jesus. There's a process, there's a maturing, and that the thing is that doesn't end until we meet him face to face. We will never get to a point where like, okay, we're done. We're now mature.
I have arrived.
The end of our, yeah. And so we carry that through our whole lives. And it's a constant daily thing. And sometimes it gets harder and harder and harder. And it doesn't get easier. Like yes, walking is now easier, but there's a new thing now that's hard, right? Nobody was counting on you to be able to ride the Ekron when you couldn't even fall out of a tree, right? Because if you get dumped off the Ekron, but you can't fall, like you're dead, so you got to learn how to fall right. And so there's new challenges that they get added on as we continue to mature, and that Jake was continuing to process through and learn through as he went on, and that never ends. And just came to my mind too, my dad. So some people might know my dad had ALS, fought through it for 5.5 years, and recently ended his journey. Went to be with Jesus in the beginning of May. And what was amazing about his journey is that, he had challenges, he had battles through his whole life, and they didn't get easier. and there were new, and I'm not going to go into everything that he had to battle through in his life, but, it kind of culminated over the last 5.5 years with this battle against ALS. And like you could imagine any believer would do when he was first diagnosed, he and my mom both got on their knees and were like, God, heal us, heal me, like take this away. You can do it. We have faith that you can do it. Please heal me. It'll bring glory to your name, the whole thing, right? Please heal me. And no answer. On their knees every day, couple weeks go by, heal me, Lord. We have faith you can do it. They had other people praying for him, heal me. I was praying for him. And then my dad said that one day they were on their knees, they're praying, and he had this very clear sense that God was saying, no, I'm not going to heal you. I'm not choosing to heal you this side of heaven. And my dad was like, okay. Well, if you're not going to heal me, then will you please let me still be able to eat and speak until I'm gone. Just please let me still be able to eat food and speak. And those are two things. Like, if you have ALS, that it works differently for everybody. Like it's a very kind kind of weird disease that not a whole lot of doctors really understand. And it works differently for different people. Like I met one of his, they call them buddies, they're ALS buddies. Met one of his buddies who she had, the first thing that went for her was her speech. She could not really move her mouth or her vocal cords. She could not speak or really eat, but she could move her arms and she could move her legs, and she couldn't stand anymore. But, it kind of started up high, in her body. And for my dad, it worked in from the outside. So his hands and his feet, and then worked kind of inward. And up until the day that he died, he was able to speak and eat. And he felt like God, answered his prayer that day and was faithful to it till the end, where he was able to speak and eat. But I, kind of a longer story, but all that to say, he had these battles, he had these challenges that tested his faith in very real ways all the way to the end. Right. And it takes a spiritual giant to wake up every day with a disease that is slowly making your body not work anymore, and to be faithful, and to still like have people over to your house and welcome them in, and maintain your generosity and your hospitality and, your love for people, and want to still give and share and be joyful and all that. And some days are tough. Some days he wasn't very joyful. Some days he was grumpy,
right.
You can imagine. So, but on the whole, right. Like he finished the race well. And so that's our goal. Right. So now he's free. Now he's healed. He's in heaven. He's dancing, and so that's
playing golf,
that's awesome.
Enjoying the best wine.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is an end to our maturing processes. There is a kind of a finishing line, but it doesn't always happen in this world. And that's kind of where Jake finds himself too, is that he makes this transition. He starts this new life. And then there's this initiation process he goes through, this testing of his, willingness and desire to be part of the people and to be in with them and everything. And then there is this point where he is able to call himself one of the people, but then it doesn't even end there, because they have this legendary, myth of the great, something Macto. I forget what the name was, but the great, rider of shadow, and he kind of fulfills that prophecy and becomes the one, or whatever. And so that's, kind of cool. And then he has this epic battle after that, where he fights against the enemy, which was the people that he came from originally, like the false world kind of people. And it kind of culminates in this ceremony at the end, where he makes the kind of like final transition to truly be whole in his true self.
That is a whole lot, right? I mean, that's when you look at Jake, who's gone from this Marine wanting his legs back as his greatest desire, because I think it never comes out and says it, but it shows it through the story of, hey, you want your legs back. And I think what's interesting about your story about your dad, at the funeral, they talked about, this is where your faith, the rubber meets the road. When we talk about it, it's really easy to be a parent before you have children. And it's really easy to parent teenagers when your kids are toddlers. Oh, here's what I would do. It's easy to say, here's what I would do for my marriage. Here's how I would maintain a good marriage while you're still single. Mm-hmm. But it's when you're in it. And right. God, it's almost like God says, do you believe this? If you do, prove it. Not in a testing sort of, it tests our faith. Mm-hmm. And that's what the initiation portion is, well, not in a way of how far will you go? How much will you put up with? The line that Natiri used was you're like a baby. But then also when he goes and he's facing and facing the sort of the priestess of the people. And she says, oh, well, he's like, no, I want to learn your ways. I want to learn this. It's like, well, we've tried to teach your people before, but you don't learn. Your cups are full. It's like, my cup's empty. And I think a lot of times I feel like I was like, I got to offer God something. I got to have all this stuff together. I was like, no, I've got something. My cup is full. I know they say that when you go to the gun range, they say that women tend to be better shooters than men. Not because of anything genetic or biological, but that women, because typically they have less experience with firearms, listen to instruction. And the men do not, because they want to, shoot sideways like from Bad Boys or something.
Actually, funny story about that. We went to a gun range, and my wife grew up in a part of Richmond that was not known for being really safe. Just put it that way. And so we go to the gun range, and she picks up the gun the first time and holds it like that, like gangster style sideways. And the gun instructors like run up behind her like, no. Like show her how to hold the gun right. But she's like, no, this is how you hold a gun. I'm pretty sure, she's like trying to pop a cap. You know what I'm saying?
Which is just funny to imagine Megan doing that.
Yeah.
that's not her jam. And so in the story, you see Jake, and he gets to this point where we all get to at some point in our lives where we have to make a choice. And he wakes up, and this is another clip. It's going to be a couple different clips put together, but where we see Jake deciding to become not like who he's been told to be, but because who he wants to be. And he wakes up from the I don't remember the bed thing. I can't remember what they call it. The terminal where he enters the avatar. Basically, he falls asleep. And sleeping is a big theme throughout this whole movie. The Na'vi call them dream walkers. He's even in the beginning of the movie, he's in cryo, he's sleeping, and it's about waking up, which again, kind of a theme in the Bible is waking up. Jesus talks about death being asleep. And if we're sleeping but dead in our sins and dead without the power of God, the Spirit descending on us like the seeds of Awa, right? But so he's sort of entering this phase and he wakes up and he says, I don't know what's real, because the avatar world feels more real than the world. And they're both actually real, which is kind of interesting. They're just locations are different. He's like, I don't know who I am anymore. He wakes up, he's got long hair. He's got not like ponytail, but he's got fuzzy hair. He's got a beard. He's not the clean cut, fresh off the boat Marine anymore. And then at the end of this, he has an encounter with the Colonel, who's like, you haven't reported for 2 weeks. What's going on? So this is the clip of Jake sort of in that transition phase, wrestling with who he is and who he's becoming.
Everything is backwards now. Like out there is the true world, and in here is the dream. It's hard to believe it's only been 3 months. I can barely remember my old life. I don't know who I am anymore.
Haven't gotten lost in the woods, have you? Your last report was more than 2 weeks ago. Starting to doubt your resolve.
Well, I see it's time to terminate the mission.
No, I can do this.
You already have. You give me good, usable intel.
Oh, this Tree of Souls place.
Yeah, I got them by the balls with that. When this turns into a shit fight, which it will. Now it's time to come in. By the way, you're gonna get your legs back. Yeah, I got your corporate approval. It's a done deal. Gonna have you on a shuttle tonight. I'm a man of my word.
I gotta finish this. There's one more thing. Ceremony.
It's the final stage of becoming a man. If I do it, I'm one of them. And they'll trust me. And I can negotiate the terms of their relocation.
And I think we all have these questions where he gets offered. He's like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what's real. It's funny. It's just 3 months ago. Like I had lunch with a friend of mine and we were talking, it's like, we feel like we've known each other forever, but I'm like, yeah, it was about 12-ish years ago that we met. It's like, was that it? Or Patrick, I think you and I a few weeks ago was like, hey, when did we start having coffee on Wednesday mornings back? I know it was before COVID because we were actually meeting in the Starbucks and we're going back and forth because I was actually a little surprised because on the one hand, I think it's been 4 years, 3 years, but it feels longer. Probably because of the stuff that we've been through during those years.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where he's there, the colonel's like, I got your legs. You just got to go on a shuttle tonight. Basically, he's trying to get Jake out of the way so that he can go blow up the Na'vi. And Jake's like, no, I have to finish what I started. I have to go through my initiation to become a man.
I loved what you were saying too about time, like the notion of kind of time. He's like, oh, I can't believe it's only been 3 months. That whole thing, because what I found and what I'm learning too, and what I think probably lots of people are reminded of frequently is how slowly time seems to move when you're doing something real, when you're engaged deeply in something that's meaningful. And we talk about it in our retreats that we go to, like, we get to like Saturday evening and we're like, hey, you guys got here like 48 hours ago. And you're like, what? No, that had to be like 6 days ago, and you're like, no,
at least a week.
Yeah. It's just amazing how slowly time moves, because you're doing real things and you're in real environments, touching real things that are alive, and talking to people about their life and getting into their stories and things. And it's amazing. And I think Jake is finding that too, that as he's involved with what's real and not kind of outside of it, dealing with everything that's fake and gray and hard lines and all that time moves more slowly. Like there's almost more life, because time seems to be moving slowly. And it too, because you'll look down at your phone to like scroll Facebook and then you'll look up and it's 20 minutes later and you're like, what just happened? Like how on earth did I just spend 20 minutes?
And I blinked and 20 minutes is gone.
Exactly. You're like, where did that even come? Because it's fake. It's not real. You're looking at a piece of plastic and glass, with binary running. Like it's all artificial. And so that's where time just gets stolen. And so it's kind of really, really cool, this idea that, when we are involved in something real, when we're doing something real, how slowly time seems to go by. And so then it multiplies and by perspective. And it almost kind of like echoes of eternity too, because at that point we'll be in the ultimate reality and time will be infinite, right? So it's like the ultimate slowdown, because it is the ultimate reality.
So as we close, as we put a bow on this, we really we skimmed the surface, really, because there are a lot of, I think, deep points to dig into. We didn't even talk about the idea of unobtainium and this idea that we pursue the things that are unobtainable, which bothered me. I'm like, that's just a not creative term for the super valuable metal unobtainium. It's like, obviously you can obtain it because that's what you're there for. But the idea that what can we do to obtain it? We didn't even talk about that sort of thing. So as we wrap up, I like giving you guys action items, something to do, something to think about, a question to ask yourself, other than see this movie and see what sparks. So, Patrick, what question or what framework, or I guess the real question is, Patrick, have I convinced you? Have I talked you into the fact that maybe there is something deeper that resonated with sort of your inner, your true self, your inner being, your inner Navi?
Yeah, I think so. And I think to answer that question, and also to give that question to the other listeners, is really to kind of go back where we started the conversation, which is the way that you were able to convince me over the last hour that there is truth in this movie that we can pull out, and that does echo of the greater story that God is telling, is the conversation that we've had that all started with, well, why do you like this movie? And I think that is the question to take away from this, is not just about Avatar, but about every story that we love. Like, if it doesn't jump off the page, if it doesn't like speak to you right away about how it echoes of the greater story, but it still, tickles something in your spirit. Like, it's still like, there's still something stirring, but you don't understand why or what it is or why you like the story. Just start with that question. Like, well, what is it about the story that you did like? What was it like? What were the scenes that jumped out at you? And then you ask that next question, which is, well, what's behind that? Why did you like that scene? What was it about that scene that you think spoke to you? And that'll get to that larger story, rather than jumping right to the larger story. Sometimes just evaluating that layer in between. Well, why did I like it? What was it about that scene that you liked it? Oh, you liked how he jumped up and ran. Well, why did you like that? Like, what was it about him jumping up out of the bed and running for the first time that really kind of spoke to you? And that'll get it, that larger story. And hey, yeah, watch the movie if you haven't seen it. Go ride the ride at Disney World, because it was really, really fun.
And you don't even ride the ride, just hang out in the line, right?
Yeah, the line was great too.
And Dave Reed had asked this question on our Facebook of, anyone get an Eden feel with the untouched sort of paradise of Pandora? And so we're doing this as part of our summer blockbuster series. So summertime's frequently a time people go on vacation, they get out of the house, go somewhere new. Probably not quite as far as Pandora, unless you're in Disney World, and then enjoy Florida in July or whenever you're there. But this idea that to take that approach that Jake had, of the childlike wonder, of the surprise of just experiencing it, because John Eldridge, I can't remember when he wrote this or which book it was in, but he said that the God who created, the creator of the world, who created the things that you love, like, he made it. Like, God made the things we love. And like, just from sort of that concept of, oh yeah, I love these and God loves this too, because he made it. This idea that, you put this time and effort, whether it's, as a creative person, whether it's a meal or pens or yard work or writing apps for things, like, those are things that you love to creating a new world, creating a new reality. And you put time and effort and really attention and affection into it. And so when you think about it, those things that you love, God loves too. And when you can sort of take that in that pantheistic way that they sort of, the distorted view of looking at it, well, no, if God made that tree or those flowers or the mountains or the beach or whatever, and I love it, it makes my heart come alive. Well, I can take that love and that emotion and that wonder and awe and direct it to the creator, because I'm not worshiping the creation. I want to worship the one who made it. And so that's my challenge. It's not much of a challenge. It's like, hey, do something you love to do, but then associate that sort of that emotion that triggers to God, not just the experience. And that, like, even when you watch the movie, get that Eden sense of untouched paradise, because that was the original intent. That was the original blueprint. That was the original design. And we're going to get it back. Like you mentioned with your dad, he's fully restored. He's not in the wheelchair anymore. He's golfing. He's drinking wine. He's hanging out. He's with his family who's already passed over and looking forward to seeing you and the kids again. Mm-hmm. But that's the hope that we have, that we can get through, that when we're sort of mired down in the dailies of remember the hope, remember the joy, remember the wonder. And I think there's a reason we have to be childlike to enter the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, and it's available now too. I think, if we get so, mired in our artificial lives, look at the room, we're sitting in, it's all artificial, right? And John Eldridge talks all the time about how once a day I need to go outside and touch something real and just put my hand to a tree. And it's true. Like if you take a walk on a greenway or, just around your neighborhood and just look above that roof line, right, at the trees and the clouds and everything, that same sense of wonder is available in earth, and kind of that it echoes of Eden, all around us. We can have that now. And, and even in Pandora, there was the Hallelujah Mountains, right? And it kind of harkens back to the verse that says that even the mountains will cry out, in praise. And I think that it does, like creation sings, and point right back to God and his creative wonder, and it's available, and we can tap into that in a sense. We can make that Helu bond or whatever with the earth in a sense. So we just touch it and we just spend time and create space. Our pastor this week at church, our campus pastors had an opportunity to preach, and campus pastor at our location talked about space, talked about creating space and how God uses that space to do works in us that he couldn't otherwise do if we're busy or don't pay attention, don't stop long enough. Use the passage around Elijah running to the mountains and hiding in the cave, and there's the earth and the earthquake and the fire and the wind and all that. But God wasn't in any of that. All the loud stuff, he wasn't in any of the big booms. It wasn't in the excitement. He was in the still, quiet, small space following all that. And so just take that time to walk around outside, look at some trees, let a bug land on you, heaven forbid, and just kind of look at it, and just kind of take it in, because it is wonderful, and I think Pandora, the movie kind of exaggerate a lot of that, the color and the animation and the flair of life, but it's there in our world too. We just have to make space to take it in.
This was a Monday night Facebook Live. If you'd like to be a part of that, follow us on the Facebook. Go to Men at the Movies. We also have an Instagram. We even have a TikTok. We are engaging in the socials or something. So this has been Paul McDonald and Patrick Creehan talking about Avatar. I wanted to call it Pandora, but
I know I do too. Yeah.
Talking about Avatar. We hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?